That's nice. A Westclox Orb from 1954. I don't know anyone locally who can identify a clock that fast, whether it be Westclox or something else. So I know we're going on the electric clock tangent here constantly, but there's something I'd like to have a little discussion about. And yeah, let's take this off the wall, let's head downstairs, and let's crack this thing open and see what makes it tick. Or more like how it doesn't tick. Well, because it's electric. And I said once in my Westclox Award video that these things do, well, there were a few clocks that did tick that were electric. But that was strictly for a novelty, or not even for a novelty, just to have a ticking clock in the house. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, viewers, it's some of those Westinghouse grandfather clocks with the radio in them. Now, how can I film this? We have to go over here. How can I film this? There we go. Well, let's do this properly now, shall we? Gotta have the studio lights on. Yes, viewers, this is a video I've been wanting to make for a while. Or at least something like this, talking about this. Anyway, these electric clocks are fairly easy to get into, at least this one is. Take the tin back off, and we're greeted with, well, there's no ticking here. Now, before we get talking about things here, let's just take a quick look around inside this clock. Very bare, not as bare as the quartz clocks of today, though. What have we got here? We've got a date stamp. This is from 5/54. So that's May of 1954. So there's not much going on in here, other than the obvious. I mean, there's two poles here, and no, there's this here. Now this, I guess you could call this the motor of this thing, but this thing here that spins is a rotor, an electric rotor, and not a motor, a rotor. What is the definition of a rotor? I don't know. I don't have the exact definition here on me. Anyway, so instead of a conventional clock, and the clocks seem to get like this, instead of your conventional mechanical clock that has all the gearing in it, has a whole bunch of gearing to make itself, well, to propel the hands. Well, in electric clocks and quartz clocks, well, you know, we're not going to talk about quartz clocks. Quartz clocks are a basket case all in themselves. No, electric clocks, they depend on one thing and one thing, well, they depend on electricity, but they depend, to make them go, the rotor makes them go. What's that gearing there then, Greg? What's all that? Well, that's to make the hands move, and that's what's called a motion work, and all clocks have a motion work. I think even quartz, yeah, quartz have a motion work, even though it's small. But yeah, all clocks and all watches have some sort of motion work to make the hands move, unless it's digital or something like that. So really what they've done, viewers, is they've just taken this, they've just made a power source. Okay, this thing here can drive the whole clock. And just slap some gears in there and away you go. Now the clock will work. And we'll plug this in. I brought my extension cord here so we can reach the nearby outlet. Excuse me, viewers. There we go. Are we going? Yes, we are. So here's one of these things in action, and this one is almost virtually silent. And the reason why that is as you can see, it's been well lubricated. Yes, I did go in this thing a couple nights ago and lubricate this with proper grease. Now, that's something I hadn't done with this particular clock. I just oiled the pivots, which I'm not going to say, well, yeah, I guess they are important in this. Pivots are important in an electric clock, but are they accessible is another question for you viewers. Are pivots accessible in these things? Well, you see with electric clocks, and this isn't with all of them, they like to cut things. They like to do little detours and do things differently, and I don't know, sometimes things can get a little hazy as to what to do. Now, with your conventional well-made clock from my experience. Generally, things are very, well, they're accessible, and they may not be easy to do sometimes, but they're accessible, and you can get to them, and they're built well. And that goes for clocks today too. Like the modern Howard Miller and grandfather clocks of today, and even an upcoming. I'm gonna do a video on an alarm clock. It's a modern one. Seems to be built well. Well, it seems to be built well enough. And even on there, everything's very doable. You can do things. Well, repair things. You can get in there and do it. You see, with electric clocks, this isn't always possible. As for the Ingram kitchenette, I don't know if you guys remember, but the dial was glued on to the movement plate. Well, fortunate for me, the glue had dried and the face had just come right off. But if it had been stuck on there, I wouldn't have been able to clean the movement plate. And it was in dire need of cleaning. So, you see what I mean, viewers? They just glue things on and do things like that. And here's another example, viewers. Can somebody tell me how to get this little crown off of this movement plate? Or off this arbor here. Here's a crown here. This is how you set the time. It goes into the gearing here. And then you can set the time and whatnot. And there's the gearing. How does this crown come off? Because if this doesn't come off, the whole thing kind of goes down like this. And this thing is stuck to this case, making it very difficult to service. And if you want to take, let's say you've taken the motor off already. Oh, wait, viewers, there's gearing there. Well, good thing I've taken my motor off. Here, let me just get this plate. And here's another oddball design, viewers. They got two plates like this, stacked on top of each other. I mean, yeah, sure, there's plates on clock movement stacked on top of each other, but this is a pretty narrow stacking job here. And how do we get in between the plates? Well, there's these tabs you can bend. Or maybe not even that. I don't even know where they are, viewers. I thought there was tabs. Oh, there's a tab. You can do a bunch of tab bending. Well, what about this case that's still stuck to it? Oh, don't worry about that. I'm not calling this a poor quality clock, viewers, by no means, but you can see what I'm getting at. There's a video I'm going to link in the description here. It's called The History of Revere and Herscher Clocks. And if you want to talk about well-made electric clocks, those are the guys you should look at. Or those are the companies you should look at, and I'll link that video. It's by a great channel, Silver Dollar Productions. He knows what he's... I would hope... I hope he knows what he's talking about. He sure seems to. I would trust his judgment on this. But anyway, he said that in the 50s and 60s, the end of the clock industry, the end of electric clocks was in sight. And electric clocks were introduced in the 20s. Well, okay, let's think about this. We got mechanical clocks in the 20s. We got electric clocks in the 20s. All the way up to the 50s. Both were still being made. There were little to no budget cuts in mechanical clocks, at least for Westclox anyway. I know, and I've got one of the contenders here from Ben versus Ben. Whoops. This one had a particular... Well, here, I gotta adjust my camera, viewers. Yes, the most fine clock competition series in all of YouTube. Personally, I think I didn't do the greatest job of executing Ben versus Ben, but we'll get it better next time. Now let me see which one this is, and we're gonna have a look here and see if this is... So viewers, I finally found it, but here's Ben versus Ben round 4 part 2, and that shows the clock, or this shows the clock being disassembled, the one I just showed you. Now this is gonna show the movement here right away, and when I pull the back off, oh, we got one more screw to undo. Fairly cheap screwdrivers I was using there, but anyway. Pulling the back off, well, there's the movement. Now there's the movement right there. As you can see, it's fairly small and square, and those aren't rivets, by the way, viewers. That movement does come apart. It's fairly small, not very complicated. I'm pretty sure this clock was one of the lower end of Westclox models here. So this was a fairly inexpensive clock at the time. Okay. And you can get to everything, you can service everything, there's nothing you can't get to in this. So that's great. This is approximately from the same era as the Westclox Orb here, who is sitting down on the table here in front of us. So why, oh why, viewers, did Westclox, and these two clocks are both made by Westclox around the same time, why oh why did Westclox make everything accessible in the mechanical clock, everything repairable, everything yada yada, you can replace it, all in that clock, and yet not in this one? This is riveted on, this entire plate here, this weird little plate thing here, this is sandwiched between two plates, and you can't get that apart very well because there's tabs, and then they got this thing in the way, and man oh man. What kind of repair job can you do there? This clock here could have been fully dismantled and cleaned, but Westclox decided not to let us do that. Or at least not let us do that in a very conventional manner, which any guy or any clock repairer would actually bother to do. No, they give us these crazy riveting things together, and they say, okay, you can figure it out. I think, viewers, it's the, well, as Silver Dollar Productions said in his history video on Revere and Telecron and General Electric, links in description, he said in the 50s that clocks were getting budget cuts, and yeah, even with this, well, I don't know, maybe even with this over here, and it's oh so fantastic movement here, I think there were, well, there were budget cuts going on. I mean, after all, the only thing made out of brass in this movement is the gear holding the spring on it, this gear here, and the balance wheel. The rest of this is either aluminum or some other metal. Well, with this here, there's fiber gears going on down here, and they were putting fiber gears in quite a few clocks at the time. And there's clocks that go back even earlier from this, like from 1952, for instance. They go back even earlier when they have fiber gears in them. I think that's because of noise. But still, I mean, I don't know if I like fiber gears or not, viewers. So why did Westclox go in and rivet things on, make some weird designs, and do weird things with the movement? Well, I think, funny enough, and this has just dawned on me here, the simplicity of the clock itself was the thing that killed it. Or the thing that killed the high production quality. The simplicity of this mechanism here killed the quality. Because there's not much going on in here, and they can afford to do that. Or maybe I should say they couldn't afford to do that because, as they said, the clock industry was going downhill at the time. Why it was I don't know at the moment. I cannot remember why he said it was. Either it was something to do with Japanese imported clocks at the time, or maybe it was something like that. I don't know precisely what it was, because it's not like there were quartz clocks at the time. I mean, all you had was electric or mechanical. What else were you gonna have? Why would the clock industry go downhill at the time? I don't really know, viewers. But yeah, anyway, clocks were getting simpler and simpler, and this is an example. And simple isn't always a bad thing, and it wasn't for this. I mean, it made it very easy to work on. Well, at the same time, it didn't, because the way they designed this. Oh man, viewers. I mean, it's basically impossible to clean. But one thing Westclox did give to you, and that was screws to remove the rotor. And I guess we can do that now if you want. Sure, we'll remove screws. It's not like it's late at night or anything. Oh dear. Look at that. This little spring thing just came undone. Okay, we're gonna have to get that back in. I'll get that back in here in a minute after we're done this. Get very close to the camera. I know viewers behind it. And you'll really see the simplicity after we take the thing that basically, well, the thing that drives the entire clock. There's one other gear attached to the rotor, and that's it. We're really starting to dumb things down here, aren't we? Oh, look at this. We'll take that off, and that's all you get. So suddenly we're going from complicated designs just down to this. I mean, you can see here there's one fiber gear and one other gear here, a couple of gears to set the time, and some crazy little mechanism going on back here. And with this thing all basiced up here, you can't take much apart here. And these gears, as you can see, won't fall out because they're somehow stamped. I think they're stamped onto this plate. So now we're stamping gears onto the plate instead of just having them there with the pivots. No, we gotta really stamp them in there. So I think that must have been cheaper to do, because why would they do it? So anyway, now you got this. You got a little device that moves the hands, and that's about it. And here's our rotor with a brass ring in the middle, and I just realized or this brass disc here, I don't know what that was for, but anyway, they cut that out. They made that one aluminum. There's some sort of metal behind this wheel here. I don't know which one that would be. I don't know what metal that is back there. But anyway, they cut that out later too. They made that aluminum, I think. I think it's aluminum. I don't know for sure. And there's that little worm gear here with a little tiny little spring on it, which I was fooling around with earlier. And I got a brass gear here. One thing, I don't know if maybe I'm pet peeving this a little too much. I don't like the whole heat shrink tubing thing they got going on here. Because I'll tell you what, if you ever need to replace the cord, it's more of a pain in the neck, but it's also more electrically safe. You know what, viewers? You know how the kitchenette? I don't know who saw the old kitchenette video, the last one I made, the one I just made about the rotor. How you just screw the cord on. Well, this is heat shrunk on, so. Plus, I think this cord's in pretty okay condition anyway. That's one thing I gotta learn how to do. Well, I have an idea of how to do it already, but messing with heat shrink tubing and for replacing cords on these things. Because I've just gotten a new electric clock. Well, not new to me. With this style of rotor in it, and it's got heat shrink tubing on the cord. And the cord is completely wrecked, so I'm gonna have to redo that. And that'll be in the next episode of Greg Goes Antiquing. Yes, we are reviving Greg Goes Antiquing. I don't know how Greg Goes Antiquing was relevant there. Well, I guess this is the spot where this clock, I got this clock on Greg Goes Antiquing. It was sitting right about there. So, I mean, yeah, I did film an episode of that here. Anyways, viewers, back to the main subject here. You're getting very little. That grease looks very disgusting, I know, viewers. But I just put it on, and the light isn't helping. It's a blue, almost. And that's aluminum. Well, the gear itself is aluminum. That worm gear there is brass, and that's fiber. With a little brass, I think that's called a cullet, on the end of that gear. On the end of the fiber gear there. I think that's a cullet. Anyway, viewers, there's practically nothing going on in here. I should probably mention one more thing before we close this up. Look at this, is just a piece of tin. You know, Westclox is really starting to, I mean, you can tell when things are going downhill, well, maybe not downhill, but when we're making budget cuts, when we're making our clock cases out of tin here, and someone went to town here with a roll of tape, I can see. And I should also mention, viewers, that there's a bunch of fantastic condition Westclox Orbs on YouTube for some reason. When everyone got this one, it seems to just be in perfect shape. Well, this one looks like it was stored over or at least when it was on its service life, or when it was originally purchased, it looks like it was stored on top of it, or just above an oven. And it looks like, and it looks like the case suffered a bit for that. Of course, someone got their use out of this, and I'd expect them to. It killed the lubrication though in the process, making the thing scream every time it was on, and or no, making it not even move every time it was on. Anyway, this clock here, despite its, well, kind of crap condition here, a little suffered cosmetically. Still a good clock when it's oiled and running, but I don't know how you'd, let's say, I don't know, a gear snapped in this thing, or somehow something broke, or something needed to be cleaned or something like that. I don't know how you'd, other than taking the rotor off, I don't know how you'd get to this. Well, I guess, actually I've just figured it out, viewers. You wouldn't, believe it or not, because Westclox like to make budget cuts, and I know I keep incriminating Westclox over everything, but it wasn't only them. It's almost like, it must have been almost like this here. So I'll do a scenario for you. A bunch of kids are standing around at high school. One guy passes a blunt to another guy, he hands a blunt to him. He goes, "Come on, man, it's good for you. Try it." Yeah, that's budget cuts for everybody. That's company budget cuts. They hand the blunt over to the next person. Of course, if I'm complaining about this, what am I doing, viewers? Because things would get so much worse over the coming years. And, 54 was only the beginning. It got far, far worse. I know I'm just going on about clocks here, viewers, but I think I think a lot of people can agree with me on this. A whole bunch of different products. I think just about everything got hit by foreign manufacturers coming in and messing with it. Well, they didn't mess with things, but they were trying to drive everybody else out of business with their cheap prices, and everyone else had to make budget cuts to compete. And so died the consumer good quality well, you had to pay up, I guess. I don't know. For a lot of basic appliances, though, and for a lot of kitchen products and things like that, and just appliances in general, and most machines, I don't know, quality took a hit for sure over the years, from the 50s and up, if that makes any sense. Not so much the 50s, but 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, everything just took a hit. Everyone took a hit off that quality-reducing blunt. If that's how you want to put it, viewers. Everyone took a hit off that, and here we are today. Obviously, though, you can do far worse than an orb. And we'll have more examples coming up. Now, I'll make sure to put the link for this in the description, by the way. This is by no means is this my video. Now, here's a pristine one with the original box. And a lot of them seem to be like this. Greg didn't get the good straw on this one. That's okay. Look at that back. That's beautiful. The finest piece of tin you ever saw in your life, viewers. I can guarantee you that. What is that? A spot of rust? Well, it looks like the whole thing's cosmetically ruined. You may as well throw it out because Westclox decided to rivet things and put weird plates on top of each other so you couldn't get it apart or part it out to other clocks. Well, viewers, that brings us to the end of this electric clock video, and we'll probably be doing another one of these in the not-so-distant future. So I thank you for sitting through this 25-minute full-on experience, and yeah, I hope you guys tune into the next video to see what's cooking up next on this channel.